Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Stephen Patterson, Executive Director of MedVR, Medical XR educational nonprofit and accelerator. We're broadcasting on Zoom and simultaneously on LinkedIn Live. We have an interdisciplinary audience from around the world, including Latvia, Pakistan, and South Africa. And welcome to the MedVR Talk series. Today's talk, using immersive VR support groups for young cancer patients, which will provide insights into the importance of the clinical domain expert and the designers and developers implementing a successful solution. We host a few talks each month, original, usually based upon peer-reviewed papers. We've hosted over 40 talks, and you can find them on our website, medvr.io. The medical specialty changes from talk to talk. One week we may focus on psychiatry, and the next on surgery. But the theme is constant. We help to tell the story of the medical XR innovator. Before introducing the moderator, let me call your attention to the talk we just posted to take place on March 6th, Measuring Spatial Navigation with XR, a unique window into early stages of dementia. Both the speaker and the moderator are experts in the field of 3D cognition, or how the brain navigates in large and small spaces, and in interactions with other people. The talk is about using VR as a diagnostic tool to measure physical conditions, a promising and growing field. I'm delighted to introduce our moderator today, Rick Shorten. He is a creative producer and supervisor, and a digital media and XR specialist. He is co-founder and director of business development at BioFlight, a team of passionate doctors, content developers, and programmers dedicated to advancing immersive medical platforms. He has a background in visual effects in the film industry prior to joining BioFlight VR over a decade ago. He's a perfect domain expert to moderate this talk. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to our moderator, Rick.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. You did a great job on the introduction. Now I don't have to do it. I'll just jump right in. So I was thrilled to be asked to host the webinar. Our experience at BioFlight, very similar in collaboration with medical professionals and specialists and patients. And so this is near and dear to our heart and our mission to use new XR technologies to support. And so our two experts here today work together closely on this project, and I won't introduce them. I'll throw it over to them, but I'll just be with you guys today and asking questions in support of their presentation. And then if anybody has specific questions for our Q&A, please put them in the chat, and I'll be tracking that while these gentlemen are introducing the project. And at the end, we will put those questions together and then discuss them with our two presenters here today. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Marks first to introduce himself, and then Dror.
Great, thanks, Rick. After Marks, I'm a practicing pediatric oncologist. Clinically, I run the Neuro-Oncology program for pediatrics here at Yale. I fell into the VR space through another role I have, which is as the medical director for the adolescent and young adult clinic. And that has brought me to take on the lead of the Yale Center for Immersive Technologies and Pediatrics and the XRP's lab, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So many hats, but lets me do some really interesting things. Talk a little bit more as we go through.
Terrific, thank you. So I'm going to go next, and I chose actually to share my background with the background of remote communication. You can see here two dimensions, the universal one and personal one. and apparently remote communication is a very early need of human beings, from the smoke signals around 900 BC to messengers. You can see the entire evolution, the phone, email, instant messaging, then the mobile phones, and now we are getting to the video conferences and, of course, virtual reality. Interestingly enough, my background coincides with few milestones along my career. Early on, I was a developer for Converse technology. I developed application with voice recognition and mobile instant messaging. Later on, I joined Nokia, connecting people through applications and, of course, the early phones. Samsung, I spent some time there. That was the first introduction that I had for virtual reality, and now with Foretell Reality. I'll elaborate a little bit more later, but this is in a nutshell my background.
Great. Dr. Marks, do you want to, I know that you have some, visual presentation materials, and we always say in VR that this is a show and tell technology. So I'll let you share screen and kind of give an overview of the program and the genesis of XRPs.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. So, as I said, Asher Marks, Associate Professor of Pediatrics, Co-Director of XRPs here at Yale, Director of Pediatric Neuro-Oncology and Adolescent and Young Adults. So XR Pediatrics is a lab, and we were founded about 2 or 3 years ago by myself and Dr. Kimberly Hifia. We are co-directors here. Dr. Hifia is a PhD. I'm an MD, so as she likes to say, she's the brains, and then I just bring it into the clinic. So we focus on the use of extended reality within research, clinical practice, patient, family, and provider education, with the goal of improving lives and reducing disparities of youth, young adults, and their families. I will say, I think one key differentiator in what we do here that's not necessarily in this slide is that we really focus on kids and young adults as the end user. So that often brings up some really interesting questions, and it really informs a lot of the work that we do. I'm not going to get into everything we do here. It looks like, we just throw it up on a whiteboard. It looks like we've got about 12 to 15 active projects right now. But the one that I want to talk about is the one that brought me to this work to begin with. And that began probably around 2017 is when we started thinking about all this. And anyone who's familiar with VR will know around that's the time of kind of Google Cardboard and murmurings of self-contained portable headsets began to start. When I took over the adolescent young adult oncology program here, it started with a desire to improve cancer outcomes in this patient population. By definition, these are ages 15 to 39, though we tend to extend that down to age 13. And it was recognized by the NIH that this is a underserved population, and that they really do require specialized care and resources. This information is really apparent looking at overall survival. While we had improvements in pediatric overall survival and older patients with cancers overall survival, this wasn't being seen in adolescents and young adults. These patients are usually lumped together with either younger pediatric patients or older oncology patients, and they never really do feel like they have their own place, their own treatment center, their own approaches. While the biology of the cancers are unique, so are the psychosocial needs. And while I could spend, decades and decades attempting to cure cancer, which is, another part of my job, it became very clear that there were much easier lifts here, and that was in the psychosocial care of this population. They frequently have depression, anxiety, boredom, loneliness. And so when we started this program to serve the AYAs, this was a real early, clear, easy lift. And so in looking at things that help, obviously psychosocial care is where it's at. Psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. But what this population often craves is an opportunity for peer-to-peer interaction. They want to interact with other patients their same age with similar diagnoses. So initially we had a lot of options to try to do this. I thought it would be easy. I thought we'd bring together support groups who could do it while they get their chemo, bring them back to the hospital. But all the patients and my social workers looked at me, like I had 3 eyes. Why would they want to come back here? Why would they want to do this while they were getting chemo? So our other options were kind of extracurricular, if you will, get-togethers, meetups. We proposed the idea of online forums, social media, teleconferences, video conferences, and these all had their own downsides, their own concerns, and their own reasons why patients didn't want to participate. Get-togethers and meetups took a lot of legwork and a lot of money, and also risked bringing these patients out of, frankly, safety zones. These patients were immunocompromised. They didn't have the time. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the energy to do these. Online forums and social media are kind of wild, wild west here. Whenever you open these up to patients, you have the risk of misinformation running rampant. We can't monitor these at all times, and these places already exist. And it wasn't a place that we really wanted to make the effort, quite frankly, to try to moderate and get under control. Teleconferences, this is, our patients' grandparents' technologies. Imagine getting on a simple, teleconference call, not something they have interest in or want to do. And video conference, Zooms, this is something that we really thought was going to appeal, but for multiple reasons, this wasn't quite up the alley for our patient population. Video conferences entail showing your face, showing your body. And when you're an adolescent, young adult with cancer, this isn't necessarily something that you are proud of, enthusiastic about sharing. And it also opens up the opportunity for distractions, right? So I'm sure that we've got lots of people on the Zoom right now running second screens with web pages, email. We do not have your undivided attention right now, I guarantee it. So a lot of these things we felt could be solved through VR. The two things that VR provided us was immersion and self-expression. The immersion component is supported by a lot of literature showing functional MRI studies showing that the brain truly is convinced that they are sharing a room, sharing a space in a separate place than when they are not in VR. And this holds true even for some early VR work with non detailed environments. It's really easy to actually get this immersion down. Again, that lack of distraction, we have a captive audience, always a great thing with adolescents and young adults. Great opportunities for body language, hands, facial expression, movement. 6-stop headsets allowed actually quite a breakthrough because a lot of nonverbal communication is kind of leaning in. So we're able to get that once we have the 6-stop headsets in place. And again, that shared experience, that shared space really makes a difference. Self-expression was something that was kind of an afterthought, but really we started to get excited about when we started planning this intervention, an opportunity for patients to express themselves through the avatar that they create. And as time has gone on, those avatars have gotten more and more detailed with more and more opportunities to express in more fantastical ways. And again, patients don't have to be seen with what I put a small s here, by their camera, but they can better be seen with a big S. They can be seen for who they feel they are and who they are internally. So that was a really interesting, exciting opportunity. When we started looking at software, we came to Foretell for many reasons. They were able to work with us directly. They offered us opportunities for privacy. HIPAA was an absolute requirement in this intervention, and so they helped us do that. Accessibility and ease of use. We wanted as few clicks as possible to get into the support room. Customizable avatars, minimal distractions, hardware agnosticity. And when I say that, I mean not just agnostic in terms of the headsets, but also being able to access this through a laptop so that a research assistant can watch what's going on and take notes. Spatial audio is imperative. It's something that we at XRPs are very keen to study further, but it really is a large part of the immersive experience and really important when we're in what we see in this picture here, a kind of group setting in a circle. You want to know where that voice is coming from so you can figure out who's talking with limited spatial cues. I'm sorry, limited visual cues. And then again, that sensitivity to body language. So I just want to jump in real quick, talk about a little bit what it takes to get something like this running in a very old, very bureaucratic institute like Yale University. There are really three things we need to think about going into this: a protocol review committee, an institutional review board, and the lawyers. So the PRC's responsibility is to ensure scientific viability and rigor. It requires us to come up with a formal protocol, consent forms, safety manuals, assessments, recruiting tools, and submit this all to the committee. This committee is here for a study like this made of oncology trial experts. So keeping in mind these reviewers here and the reviewers I'm about to mention in the IRB, they're not used to necessarily digital interventions. They're used to early phase trials. I've sat in these boards. It's really easy for a phase 1 trial with a drug no one's ever seen before to get through, but quite honestly, to get a digital intervention through, it takes a bit more legwork. The IRB is more responsible for protecting the rights and welfare of the human research subjects. Oftentimes, once you get through the PRC, the IRB tends to follow along, but not always. In our case, we did have to expand and add in different documents showing what we would do in certain emergency situations. And it was a really valuable experience. There were things that we simply hadn't thought about. Things like what happens if a patient disconnects. Well, it's not necessarily a simple technical issue. There may be an emotional issue there. And we've got to figure out how to get in touch with that patient quickly and safely. And then finally, the night before this all launches, of course, I get calls from IP lawyers and HIPAA lawyers, which delays things for several months as those negotiations take place. You're going to see this anytime with a new technology or working with an outside partner. We thought we leapfrogged it, but they hunted us down sooner or later. So those had to get in place. I'm going to jump into a video about this, and Dror is going to share some videos as well so you can visualize this, but so as not to be jumping back and forth, I'm going to go straight to the good stuff here, which is what we found with this study. Keeping in mind the design of this study was 16 patients participating in 6 support groups, and this was done in groups of 4. So we ended up with 4 groups, each meeting 6 times. And we did pre and post assessments to look at depression, anxiety, and resilience. The really exciting thing, I'll jump to depression, anxiety, resilience. We did see increases in resilience, which were really exciting. We used the CD risk survey to do that. Depression, anxiety, we saw trends, but we were not able to reach true significance, and we hope to do that in further studies. But there was trends towards improvement. Biggest issue, I think, is a lot of these patients came in without severe depression, anxiety. They were more in the mild, so it's hard to show improvement there. But the really exciting things are seen on the right side of your screen there: retention and participation. I always say we did not do a randomized control trial with this because the control, we had historical controls. We knew how many patients were coming to support groups before, and that answer was 0. We could never get support groups working. Patients simply never showed up for multiple reasons. But with this approach, we had a participation rate close to 90%. So we approached 20 patients, 16 agreed to participate, and a retention rate was 70%. 70% of patients who started completed these support groups, and that was thrilling. So we finally had an opportunity to engage our patients in support groups. Moving on to the medical coding, this is really, really important if we ever want to get reimbursed for projects like this. I could talk about this for hours to come, but there are codes out there that offer opportunity if we treat this as a tool and not an intervention in and of itself. That gets into questions about FDA approval. I could also wax poetic about for a long time, but this is a tool. This is not an intervention in and of itself. This allows us to provide interventions that we know already work, that being support groups. And with the wrap of our population, we are looking to expand this to rare disease populations. There are plenty of patients out there in more rural areas who have rare diseases and don't have an opportunity for support groups. This changes that. This also lets us get to hospitalized patients, with diseases such as cystic fibrosis, where they are at high risk for infection. We have expanded this to our gender program. These are transgender and LGBTQ youth who are absolutely loving this intervention, especially with the opportunity to design their avatars as they feel most represented. And we do have a paper on that is currently under review. And we have also found that parents have asked to participate in this as well. So fantastic success, opportunities for expansion, looking to bring this nationally to underserved communities throughout the country, and other populations as well. So quick slide here, XRPeds, xrpeds.org, follow on the socials at XRPeds, and I've got emails for myself and Dr. Hivkia there at the bottom. I will stop sharing here. I'm going to give you a 3-minute thrill reel on kind of what we've been doing, and then I will hand it over to Dror.
It's that point in growth where you are stuck. You're in between childhood and adulthood. you are trying to work your way through something, right? You're trying to work your way through, the social structure of the world. Who are you?
And that's a normal teenager thing, and relationships end and friendships end and people go off to college and you lose touch. And then you throw a cancer diagnosis on top of that. And it's like everything else takes a back seat.
About 10, 12, maybe even 15 years ago, some of the initial data started coming out showing that these patients weren't just doing as well as younger patients and older patients. And so we started looking at that and saying, why is this population not doing well?
The primary, like mental health diagnoses that my patients have are anxiety, depression, and adjustment disorder, which of course makes sense because you have a cancer diagnosis and you're forced to adjust.
And when someone's in a state of depression, loneliness, anxiety, that compliance, that ability to do what's prescribed diminishes. And so there are certain cancers that we treat where we really need these patients to be taking their oral medications when they're not there. And if they're not taking those medications, the cancer will come back. And so there's a direct play in there of an inability to treat the cancer due to the mental health issues.
Adolescents don't want to come back to the hospital when they don't have to, and they don't want to interact with each other while they're too sick. For this specific age group, they like to feel like they're with other people and that almost they could reach out and touch them if they wanted to. We worked with a company to help kind of build this software from the ground up, where we kind of designed the space. It's, very calming earth tones, and there are 4 chairs and then my chair. And it allows patients to connect with others from wherever they are while feeling still very immersed and like they were in the same room. The mouth moves when you talk, which is pretty cool. They have handsets so they can control kind of, if they're talking with their hands, you can see that. You get kind of some unique body language that comes across. It's a safe space where they feel like I can share anything, and it's adolescent, young adult oriented. So it doesn't feel like a children's hospital. It doesn't feel like you're in the pediatric ward or anything. It's age appropriate care. I think that is the best way I can describe it.
This is something that patients who may not have the means to come into the city, come into support groups, come to the hospital on a weekly basis, are able to participate in. So we're able to reach those in different demographics, whether it be socioeconomic or geographic.
All right, that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dror.
Terrific. Thank you. I'll share. Just one second. Okay, so I'll tell you my side of the story. Just before I joined the Glimpse Group, the example that I was given by the CEO of the Glimpse Group was the example of passing a ball between participants in virtual reality. And that resonated a lot. All of a sudden, I understood the potential of first getting people together, and then how the technology allows certain capabilities that otherwise are not possible. Definitely not through other mediums of remote communication, as I showed before. And I decided, okay, I want to join the mission, or I want to join this company and to take the lead of Foretell Reality. Couple of words about Foretell Reality and the parent company. So Foretell Reality is one of 6 subsidiaries under the Glimpse Group. And the Glimpse Group is a startup of startups that actually built an ecosystem of companies that focus on extended reality, 3 dimensions, 3D, Web3, and AI software. We collaborate a lot, we share know-hows, and definitely if there's a need for more than one subsidiary to participate in building a product, there's a nice ecosystem and collaboration between us. It's a global operation, and we went public a couple of years ago. We focus on several verticals, but the main ones are healthcare, education, enterprise marketing, and the public sector. You can see a few examples of the clients that we have and are catering for. When it comes to Foretell Reality, I must admit at the beginning, it was around Dr. Mark's idea. There were a few other concepts of how to get people together, but thanks to Dr. Marks and his team, we got the first clear direction, and that was therapy and support, especially in the setting of support groups. And then we understood more and more what is the potential here, what is the mission that we want to put in front of us. And we articulated at a certain point that our mission is to enhance human interaction through XR. It's not only enhancing human communication, it's actually the interaction. And with this very ambitious mission, not to mention that sometimes technology is associated with how bringing people apart rather than together, we identified that in addition to the therapy and support use case, there are at least two other main buckets that we would like to step into. One is soft skills development, and the other one experiential learning. The reason that you see the circles overlap is that because there's a lot of overlap between these use cases. Part of therapy and support is to be able to acquire certain soft skills and interpersonal capabilities. We hear about social anxiety, we hear about some other conditions, but definitely soft skills is key to overcome. Experiential learning also has a lot to do with the immersive, you see in a second, and the ability to interact with others to learn and so forth. And we identified also key tenets that we would like to follow. One is to solve real life problems. We're not trying to solve things that do not have real issues and real problems to tackle. The other one is to add value to existing non-XR practices. So this is a little bit of a mouthful, but basically what it says, we're not inventing the practice. Support group is not something new. Experiential learning is not something new. Workshops and soft skills training not something new. We focus on how this new technology can add dimensions that otherwise cannot be achieved. And that adds a lot of specificity to what we do and concreteness when we work with clients. We focus on encouraging and benefiting from social interaction, encouraging users to benefit from social interaction. We focus on providing tools to the moderators. We are not a B2C company. We are B2B, and therefore the importance of moderator is very high. Not to mention, because of the nature of these use cases, we focus on the tools that I mentioned to allow leaders to conduct the sessions without interference and with maximum control. And as I mentioned, addressing client needs. This is an interesting table. I'm not going to go over everything here, but on the left side, you see the typical barriers to therapy and support. And on the right side, how we Foretell leverage XR to address these problems. I can typify the problems into a few buckets. I mean, there's psychological barriers like stigma, concern over judgment, and being exposed. We have the logistical issues like travel time and cost. Dr. Marks touched it also in the video. We have some emotional barriers as well, and some other things that you see on the next slide are not achieved by the other means of technology. I want to give a couple of examples. I mean, for example, anonymity. I mean, there is the first level of anonymity to say, okay, I don't want to turn the camera on. I don't want people to know me. But there are more and more dimensions below that that is worth thinking about. Speaking of the anonymity in the context of therapy and support, one of our clients has a very extensive program to treat people who suffer from alcohol use disorder. And they tend to say that Alcoholics Anonymous has anonymity in the name for a reason. And Alcoholics Anonymous, I think that they started around the 60s. There was definitely no VR back then. But when people meet, they actually lose their anonymity. And the anonymity is not only by masking in a way your appearance, you can play with the appearance. Okay, we mentioned, Dr. Marks mentioned the study that the gender clinic at Yale is using Foretell Reality for their activity. We also added the ability to mask your voice if it is needed. You can play with the identity in various ways, and on. We identified at least 5 dimensions where the use of avatar can be very, very interesting in this context. the importance not to bother yourself to get to the meeting and to do it from the comfort of your home is really, really important. But in this context, presence, which is a key word that is mentioned by a lot of VR and extended reality folks, is something that is worth understanding, because when we meet each other, there's much more than, oh, we just see the body of each other. It is, we share the same environment, we look at each other's eyes, not to mention facial expression and so forth. Some of these things are a little bit still limitations in virtual reality, but we know already that these are on the track to be resolved. And let me jump to this slide. I mean, when we compare ourselves to other remote communication technologies, if you will, although the in-person is not remote, the two references that we compare our experiences are one to video calls and the other one to in-person. And in this summary table, you can see the elements of feature and capabilities that are required for interpersonal interaction, definitely in the context of therapy and support, and how video calls cannot satisfy these needs. In-person has some limitations. And when it comes to virtual reality, a lot of the things, as long as the technology is being used properly, can solve it. I mentioned the anonymity, the sensing of physical presence, the ability to share the same space, and even the ability to move from one experience to another. With the flip of a button in our application, you can move from a talk therapy environment and session to something that is much more active. You're going to see examples in a bit. So let's talk a little bit about the product evolution. You can see on the top left, you can see the horrendous avatars, and I feel free to say that because these are avatars that we created early on. There were no third-party avatars to play with. Actually, one of the concerns that I would mention also later, main concern was that these avatars are so horrendous that, you know, the kids, the participants are not going to like it at all, and that by itself is going to ruin the entire pilot. Apparently, the results or the response was different, but we'll elaborate on that later. And you see the evolution of slowly adding also tools. This is activity. This is the board that you see here. The color of the chairs changed. There's a little bit more interior design here. Still, on top right, you can see a very lame, so to speak, ability to customize the avatar. And then we made a nice progress with third-party avatars in this case, and with much richer design. And today we primarily, not only what we primarily, at the bottom right, you can see that we use the meta avatars, enormous and marvelous ability to customize the avatars from the look and the appearance to accessories and clothing. Another dimension is the environment. I mean, we started with this meeting center, we call it the meeting center that you saw on the next slide, and we started adding avatars, environments. You want to have different settings. This is one of the premise of virtual reality. You can wander between different experiences that also entice you to different activities. Here on the top left, you see a rooftop with nice view of a city. Here, the folks at the center are sitting on a deserted island and see sometimes whales and some activity around them. But we have more professional environments as well, not only recreational ones like a boardroom. If you want to practice soft skills, or if you want to practice how to interact with others in more professional setting, this environment definitely satisfies that. The campfire is a typical example for getting people together to share something that is more intimate, is more fun, but at the same time, allowing people to bond at another level. We had a meditation garden that we have here for some physical activity you see on the next slide. And on the bottom right, you see our feature of sharing 360 videos and pictures. 360 videos, pictures enhances exponentially the ability to share environment and settings. Either the client brings these pictures, but even the users can decide that they want to share a story around a special location, whether it is in their home or whether it is outside, and then share it with in an immersive way with all other participants. And the third dimension that is worth mentioning in the context of the product evolution is the activity. So it's not only as we started sitting and talking, you can do additional things. You can play in a virtual swimming pool, you can play guitar, even you can throw these inflatable tires on each other and have a lot of fun. You can stand on a stage and practice presentation skills, which is more on the professional side. But again, we know that presentations is something that does trigger some anxiety, and this is just one example how you can practice that and get some constructive feedback without feeling too much exposed, not in front of a camera and definitely not in person. 3D drawing is something that has a lot to do with art therapy, and this is amazing to see how our users use it and how creative they become to express emotions or to play between themselves. You can watch movies together. And in the center of the bottom, you see something that we are very proud of that we launched a few months ago, which is the dog park. We actually have a dog park, looks like Central Park here in New York, and you have dogs, virtual dogs that react to different activities that participants do, including if you pet the dog, I mean, you see hearts coming out of them for the love that you share with them. And on the bottom right, this is a new thing that we adding more and more to our platform, which is actually physical activity in order to, first of all, be active. And the other thing, it does a lot with the communication between the participants, strategizing, collaborating, something that is very, very nice for combining therapy and support or for the soft skills use case that I mentioned before. Let me switch in a second to a short video that shows different examples of how our platform and features is being used in the context of therapy and support, peer support, and support groups. I want to just highlight a few points that are listed on the left. I mean, the elements that we keep putting in our experiences, we call it experiences, not only the environments. One, it needs to be immersive. Obviously, it is VR. It needs to be social and allow anonymity if desired. People should feel safe that they are not exposed, that nobody is watching them unless it is mentioned explicitly. Non-judgmental, playfulness. This is something that actually I want to emphasize. We are not a gaming company. This is an important distinction. I mean, we're adding fun elements in order to foster and encourage the interaction. Gamification and playfulness is different than gaming. This is something that we are very adamant not to go to the down the road of a gaming application. Versatile, customizable, and accessible. These are other elements that we keep incorporating into our designs. And now I'll stop and I'll share a video quickly.
Forgot that my feet were cold. I'm like,
Thanks.
Thanks for that, Dror. So I think that gave us a really great overview of sort of where the program started, your guys' efforts to work together, but maybe sort of two-part question. You can both answer this. You know, one, you spoke, Dr. Marks, of just some of the challenges of getting this program off the ground at Yale. I would assume that after the success of getting this off the ground and paving that way, I would assume there's more. It wouldn't take 9 months to get it off the ground the next time around. Maybe it would take 6. But maybe you can just describe real quick how, from start through the project, how have you seen, because I know you guys started in 2019, how have you just seen adoption and socialization and acceptance of these technologies, at Yale? And then, Dror, the same question, how are you seeing the adoption with your medical clients in education? So it's just interesting, the fusion and then the adoption. So maybe you guys can just each take a turn speaking to that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can take credit for the increased acceptance here. I think that, VR itself has become more mainstream. I think a lot of that has to do with some of the earlier headsets that we were working with, the Oculus Go, the Quest 1. And I think people have their own, outside of work experiences. So they're a little bit more familiar with what that technology is. There's a little less fear about it. I remember doing one of the IRB meetings, there were questions that were just so off the wall, I didn't even know how to answer them. Like, how do we make sure a monster doesn't appear and scare everybody? It's like, well, we're not going to program a monster. There's just things so out of left field. And I think there's the better basic understanding at this point. I can say that there are institutes that have even more robust on-the-ground clinical programs involving VR. Children's of Colorado use it, on an everyday basis. Cedars-Sinai has a tremendous program. And so I think the more that we actually see headsets in use by patients in the hospital, the more accepted they're going to be. I also think that the utilization of headsets in medical education is also helping quite a bit. Our first year anatomy students now use them during their gross anatomy course, which is the first course a physician ever takes. So when you see it in your first course and you see it again several years later in the clinic, I don't think it's quite as jarring.
Yeah, so I'll add a couple of points. I mean, I definitely agree with Dr. Marks. I mean, first of all, it's new technology. And for good or for bad, I mean, we experienced the evolution of this technology since 2019. It started it before, and you saw it in the designs, but that also tied to the hardware, right? I mean, in the beginning it was 3DOF, now it is 6DOF. Now we have also facial expression. It's great to see that Apple is entering the market to go from a slightly different angle. But when it comes to adoption, first of all, it is the awareness that this technology exists. Second, it is how you translate the technology to the problem, or how do you articulate the problem, and then find the solution to the technology. There's a barrier that I keep mentioning to new clients, and I call it the imagination barrier. First of all, you get introduced to this thing. We are always used to thinking 2 dimensions when it comes to virtualization. Now it's all immersive. And now you start thinking, okay, how this technology can serve me. And working with Dr. Marks and other clients of ours, we feel that these clients are pioneers in understanding the technology and how it can solve things. I think that with pricing going down, more adoption of the technology, regardless of our use cases, then the scale will come after that. But again, it's a long process, longer maybe than we would have hoped for, but it is happening.
Thank you. I want to just talk real quick with some time we have left to make sure we've carved out any opportunity for participants to throw a question in the Q&A. So go ahead and do that now, because I'll be looking at those shortly. If anyone has direct questions, we can answer on the live. I just want to talk briefly about the patients that went through it. You guys were able to get a lot of good data out and a lot of good user experience data, but maybe if you can just sort of take a moment as to just anecdotally talking to them about the experience and about the use of this. Did this just, in you said the participation rate for in-person support sessions can sometimes be 0. So just what sort of surprised you about the reaction? What was encouraging about the reaction? Maybe just a little information about sort of how the users went through the program, and then what they told you they liked, didn't like, what to change, all of those good things.
Yeah, there's a lot here to unpack. I think one of my biggest surprises was the retention of patients that kept coming back. I think it's easy when you've got a teenager and you say, we're going to give you a new piece of technology, it's really cool. for them to get excited and accept, enrolling on the trial, for them to come to a session or two and then just be like, yeah, I don't want to talk about my feelings. This just isn't worth it. But what the retention told us is that, and what we saw kind of in session, is that they were much more willing to open up. I think that there's a value to that, what I'll call semi-anonymity. I think it hits a sweet spot, where they feel represented, but their face is not shown. Their voice is heard, but it may be, a little different than their typical voice, especially when we use voice modulation, which we've done quite a bit with our LGBTQ community. There's something there that gets patients to open up, and gets them to keep coming back. The responses that we had were very positive. We're working on a bit of a qualitative analysis now, but I mean, to sum things up, it was just excitement to be able to talk to other kids in the same situation as themselves, with kind of a lower barrier of entry. So that's, I think, our general takeaway is that it was enjoyed. Patients kept coming back, and they felt a real opportunity to express themselves and talk to those in a similar situation that they didn't have before.
I'll just slide into a question from in the Q&A that kind of lines up with my next question, is sort of the evolution and iteration of the product. You come out of published study, you believe you have an effective tool that you can use. Sort of two questions. How do you sort of see the future administration of it, as far as in clinic and at home? And then how do you bridge that, just as far as any security considerations or comfort of use? And then how do you present the platform? And maybe that's maybe Dror's. Now that you have this built, how are you rolling it out and scaling it? And what are your plans for that, especially for people who might want to get involved in using similar tools in their practice? So maybe if you guys can stitch that together, that would be great.
Dror, do you want to jump in?
Sure, yeah. So I'll start. Maybe just a quick comment on what Dr. Mark said. I mean, anecdotally, it was interesting when we started working together to understand what is the success criteria that we expect. And Dr. Marks, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, your expectation was that you wanted to see the same awkwardness that happens in real life. And we were a little bit disappointed by that success criteria. We wanted to see more openness than real life. And I'm very happy that eventually it happened. We have a little bit of limitation in terms of getting to patients. We do have access to other clients of ours, but obviously we should not be aware of what is going on in the sessions. We should not be a witness or anything is recorded because of the HIPAA and other elements. But it was very, very helpful to get this feedback. And as I mentioned, when we expanded to additional clients that we have more access to, it was very much eye-opening to see what is needed, what people want to add, and we keep getting this feedback on our own. In terms of, rolling it out to others. So I start by saying that we are a B2B company. We are not a B2C company. So we really try to work very, very closely with our clients who are not the consumers in order to introduce them to the technology, to define the problems, and then to solve it, as I mentioned before. And that process takes time. It's not something that, in many ways, it matches the stage that the technology is at this point. We do think that in the next couple of years, a lot is going to happen. And it's great to be in this area that slowly we actually establish these things with our clients. Again, thanks to Dr. Marks and the team, there's a protocol of how to roll out such a thing in a hospital and outpatient environment. We are not the subject matter expert on the medical field. We are the subject matter experts in virtual reality, and therefore this synergy collaboration between subject matter experts and the technology is so critical in order to write the playbook of how to roll things out when the time comes, and the time is coming for more mass adoption.
Just sort of one final thought that I have. What's next for, you mentioned a further expansion, Dr. Marks, both at Yale and nationally. Just from a top down, how do you see that the sort of deployment of a national program, starting with what you've done at Yale? And that may be a big question, but maybe if you've thought it through about how you might expand this out for multi-site further clinical, and then hopefully a national program. What's next for XR Peds then?
Yeah, I think about it constantly. We just launched last week our support groups for our older young adults. So these are folks in their 30s and 40s with metastatic breast and colon cancer. I was reminded of just how much work it still takes to get patients comfortable and into headsets for the first time. This still is not a mainstream. It's not like a cell phone. So it does take some effort to get that done. And so in the sites that we're collaborating with 3 other sites nationally. We need to find, and we have found, champions at those sites who are comfortable with presenting the headset, orienting to the headset, helping with technical issues, which frankly is not on Foretell's side. It's at the, on the vendor of the headset themselves. Wi-Fi issues, things like that. And so you really need a local champion who's going to be there, sit with an enrollee and get them in the headset. I'm on the board of directors for a charity called Child's Play, and they started as a charity that provided video games to hospitals, and they moved on to this technology kind of expert positions. These are folks that work directly with patients, managing technology in the hospital. And I anticipate them being great advocates as we kind of move this forward in helping patients get into headsets and utilizing technology in the hospitals.
Or what have you seen just through the last minutes we have with through this program, but your other clients, just as far as that sort of penetration and adoption? I know you support them, but as far as, developing with medical partners and then seeing it through their health system and all the layers of adoption and buy-in that you need, just any sort of new update as far as how hospitals are looking at this, even though it's a new technology, is there more awareness, is there more socialization, and just as far as your side as a technical partner?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we see the incoming requests for information. I can tell you that, just by the number of requests and demos that we provide, there's more and more awareness. And I think that I don't know if to call it word of mouth or just, the time that new technology takes to brew and to catch some traction. And again, I mean, studies like the one Dr. Marks and his team published helped a lot in order to show the validation of the technology. But it is a long process. I mean, hospital medical institutions are not easy to jump. I mean, the fact that you can get reimbursement for certain activity is huge. But you see it also from other VR companies that we work with or that we see in the market that requires a little bit more push. And on the private side, I see we're very lucky to work with one of the organizations I mentioned before, North Star Care, doing amazing work in spreading the word through their extensive program that they developed. But it does require, as Dr. Mas said, effort of building that. By the way, not only in the medical field. I mean, as I mentioned, one of our use cases is experiential learning. If you don't have champions at universities that understand the value of experiential learning, hands-on experience that virtual reality allows, and not just reading from the reference book, to build the curriculum. And we help in that regard to build the curriculum, to build the program based on our understanding of the features that we develop, and sometimes we develop special features for these clients. It does require these things. I mean, one of the examples that I keep mentioning, although it is not one-to-one, I mean, imagine that you have PowerPoint. Okay, what do you do with it? Even Zoom, what do you do with it? You need someone to show you what are the features, and you need to know the problems you're trying to solve, and then see whether the technology helps to solve that.
Great. Well, I know there was a question regarding taking a look at some of the materials that were presented. So I'll leave that with Stephen to connect any participants who want either copies of the deck or some other materials, either from Foretell or from XR Peds. So Stephen, I'll throw it back to you just to wrap up and let people know where they're going to be able to find this and to access materials.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful talk. And I think the multi-user is just a feature until the connection between the domain expert and the technical experts, and this is a successful model to push ahead others. In terms of follow-up, in a couple of days, this video will be posted on our website, so you can go through it. If you need to reach me with a question, it's Stephen with a V at medvr.io, and I'll follow up for you with you. So I'd like to thank Dr. Marks and Dror for a great talk and sharing their experience being innovators. It's a great way for other people to learn and to expand this field. And I'd like to thank Rick for a great job moderating. I was delighted that you joined us, and that you were the perfect moderator. Thank you to the audience. As you leave, there's an exit survey. It's just, I think, 5 questions. You can get through it in about 10 seconds. So if you'd spend a little bit of time on that. And thank you, and we'll see you next time.